But it's an attempt to wrap our minds and to clarify. And remember, he told Moshe, write these words on this plaster-covered stone, and then explain it. And then if you look in Nehemiah chapter 8, when they had that great big feast on Yom Teruah, he, half a dozen guys and the Levites all explained it to the people. So you could say, whether you have a person standing in the pulpit, or like me, a talking head on the video, or you make a movie, it's an attempted explanation, which is fair. It is legal. And you could say, well, some movies are better than others. Some preachers are better than others. Some book of parables, metaphorical poetry is written better than others. Even David writing, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Gosh, does that do him an injustice? It's basically David doing Psalm 23 is just like the movie called The Exodus, or the Ten Commandments, or Abraham and Moses or something. So I would still say that that's fair to. We've got to be careful not to be idolaters. That's for sure. It's no different than a golden calf. I mean, how is a dove or a lion any different than a golden calf in writing Yahweh's name on it, like Aaron did and got in super big trouble for it?
What's the difference with the Ark of Covenant? It's got the two cherubs on it.
Well, you could look at that and say, hey, wait a minute, why did Solomon have pictures of palm trees and pomegranates and lions? It's like nobody said that Solomon did the right thing, but Yahweh still sanctioned it. And it's like, I'm just saying, I don't want to point at other idolaters and say, well, he did it, so I can too. It's like, I'm trying to find the, you might say, the best, safest place to be and still be an artist. How do you do that?
See, I'm an oil painter, and I stopped oil painting years ago because I didn't know if I was doing idolatry by painting pictures.
I've had the same thoughts, and that could be its own midrash discussion. I'm telling you, I didn't want to take my time and put my labors into painting something which Yahweh said, I told you not to do that. Why'd you do that?
Yeah, but let's not forget when he says don't create any images to bow down to them and worship them. If you're an artist, you can paint whatever you want. Just don't bow down before it. Somebody says, oh, well, what about the Christmas tree? Well, we come from Christian understanding where they have a Christmas tree. My children, which are all adults now, not only they have children, but their children have children. And some of them still celebrate Christmas because that's what I taught them when they were kids, right? And they said, well, Dad, does that mean now that you're walking in a way that you're not going to come to our place because we have a Christmas tree? I said, no, but just don't ask me to bow down in front of it to pick up a present or whatever. I don't agree with it, but I'm not going to alienate my family because of it, where some people have done that. Because there's a Christmas tree in the house, they won't go to their house. That's not the way, that's not what Yeshua wants. That's not what the Father wants. So again, let's not get carried away just because somebody paints an image. It's painted and then bow down to it. There's a big difference with some artists.
But then the Christians could argue that the plastic baby Jesus out front is an idolatry either during December.
That's right. So remember, Jesus did go to the house of Republicans and sinners, right? Each one of these things could be hours and years of a conversation well met, well taken to heart. And if one person says, hey, listen, I'm going to paint a picture of a lion. I'm just going to do it. It's like, well, go ahead. I'm not going to, but I'm not going to criticize somebody else does. I'm just saying that's why it becomes an issue of criticism, because some people look at this and say, gosh, I'm just not going to do it. And so I had to decide for myself if I can do art using Yahweh's words. I'm just going to try to see if I can do that. I don't even know what it means. I've never seen anybody else really do it before. I know I've seen some Jewish calendars where artists have turned modern flame letters into geometric graphics, and I can appreciate what they did. I didn't necessarily like that art, or I didn't like their style, but it's like, well, that's a good idea. They've tried to do the same type of thing. Okay, let's see if I can do that. That's all. If somebody wants to paint a picture of a mountainside with a with a house and a cow, I'm not going to say they're creating pictures of idolatry. It's like, okay, then is it okay to do a picture of a landscape with a choo-choo train, not a picture of a landscape with some buffalo and horses? It's like, where do you draw the line? But these are all valid questions. It's like if we want to walk in Yahuwah's ways, let's decide how to do that.
Well,
Better
Eric,
than off and say, I don't care.
Eric, you've been at my house on Zero Avenue, right? The one we had before I sold it. I have two murals. Yep. One was of the splitting of the sea with Moses standing there, and then I have the words above it that he spoke. And then I also have in what we call our Jerusalem room, a picture of the actual temple. And no matter where you stand in the room, it looks like the temple's oriented towards you. And these cost me thousands and thousands of dollars to build or to have them done. And it took the artist months to get it done, right? But those are great now because I've got a picture of the temple, or I got a picture of Moses standing by the sea, or in my house now I have a beautiful picture of a lion that somebody did for me, and he's over the walled city of Israel, looking down like the Lion of Judah. Does that mean now I'm worshiping lions? Or come on, guys, usually it's a matter of Yahweh created those things. There's nothing wrong with painting, or even the scenery behind you. They're painting that. There's nothing wrong with that, so long as you don't use it as an idol and start bowing down to it. Just like the cross with the snake on it that they raised up in the wilderness, and then later on they had to destroy it. Why? Because they were worshiping the item rather than what it represented. We have to be very careful.
So you're saying it's the intent in what you're creating.
That's right. If you're creating something for beauty and everything else, then you wouldn't be able to build a house, you wouldn't be able to build a temple, you wouldn't be able to do anything. It's all your heart condition at the time. It has nothing to do with, now I'm not saying you should paint gargoyles and put them on your house. That's a different story altogether. But again, there's nothing wrong with that in itself if you're not bowing down to them. If that's your concept of art, then fine. I just wouldn't have it on my house, but that's neither here nor there. It's everything that's in your heart.
Gideon, when he had conquered the enemy, he melted down, I think it was bronze or maybe it was gold, and he made a piece of armor, like a breastplate or something, and that was like, hey, look at, we were victorious. But people, I believe this was the story, that people years later used that as some kind of a relic, so they had to destroy it. And the same thing with you might say, the Nun Psalmic. As soon as you start turning something from a memory, something like a piece of memorabilia to commemorate a great thing, and then you turn it into a talisman of power, it's like, okay, that's sorcery, get rid of it. It's like, oh, come on. We as humans have this tendency to go astray.
Why do you think the Father destroyed the temple? They were making the temple an idol. It became their idol. It was, it's our talisman. We can't be defeated. We have the temple. We have the Ark of the Covenant. And they used it as, like Eric was saying, a talisman. So he took it away from them. Why? Because they weren't worshiping the concept, which is his house, that it's him that they should be worshiping, not the darn house.
I did this video up in Montana about Isaiah 29. I think it was 2 years ago. And it starts off saying, Ariel, Ariel, city where David dwelt. And Yahweh says, you will be to me as Ariel. So what is that supposed to mean? Well, we did that whole video. It started off with this helm of a ship underwater encrusted with coral. But basically, Ari is the word lion. El is God. So it was Lion of God, Lion of God. Well, Ariel. And so people were saying of Jerusalem, just like you were saying, Mark, they were saying, hey, David dwelt here. And David was the word dude means beloved. So David was the beloved of El, and the lion, David was empowered like a lion, and it was the picture of the Lion of Jerusalem or the Lion of Judah. And it's like, yeah, our Elohim would never let this city go down. But then when it says, when Yahweh's speaking, and Isaiah 29 says, you will be to me as Ariel. What does that mean? It's a play on words. See, this is the proof. This is one verse that's the absolute proof that Yahweh plays around with the language with multi-levels of communication. If you put the letter Kaf in front of Rel, Kaf, Aleph, Resh, Yod, it literally means ugly and unseemly. It's like disgusting. This stuff is junk. This stuff is just polluted. And when he says, you will be to me like Rel, he didn't say you'll be to me like Rel. That's the English translation. What the words in Hebrew really say is, you will be to me, Kaf, Aleph, Resh, Yod, Aleph, Lamed. And the only way to really know what's being said in Hebrew, to get the wordplay, the puns, is to break it down into the letters and look at every 2 and 3 letters. And then there was other stuff written in that chapter. He basically said, I'm going to sink the flagship of Israel, which is why I showed the picture of the coral encrusted helm. But then there's other words that are translated sorcery or necromancy, but it's actually ghost, which is a voice from the past. And it says, like, there's this voice from the past that he's going to let revive from the dust. Well, that's Paleo-Hebrew, a voice from the past, like a dead ghost, but that still has the life is still in it. And so that was the whole talk I did. But see, to me, reading into pictures, it's like, oh, he's talking about ghosts. That's a bad thing. Mike mentioned gargoyles. Oh, no, those are pictures of the demons. You don't want to. It's like, no, wait a minute. From what I understand, in the Middle Ages, people put gargoyles or what looks like demons on the carved images on the cathedral in order to scare away the demons. So those gargoyles were actually like Yahweh's pets, the pets of Elohim that'll scare away the demons. And we lost track of the real story and just say, no, why did they put carvings of demons on the churches?
That's any different than putting the scarab in your props.
Let me share a story with you. I went to a church one time, and they were singing a hymn of some kind. And on the first verse, they faced the front of the church. And then on the second verse, they turned to the back of the church and sang. And then for the third verse, they turned around and turned to the front of the church. And after the services way back when, 20, 25 years ago, I asked the pastor, I said, why did people turn around? He says, well, we've always done that. I said, well, why do you do that? He says, I don't know, but we've always done it. So I said, well, he said, I'll tell you what, I'll find out. He called the old pastor that was at the church before, and he says, why were we singing this particular hymn this way and turn around and sing the back of the church and then turn around and sing it to the front of the church? He says, well, we had projectors in the old days, and we had the first verse projected to the front, the second verse projected to the back, right? So that's what they were doing. All of a sudden it becomes a tradition. Another example of that was a friend of mine. She was asked by her daughter, they put a roast in a pot, but she cuts off the ends of the roast. And the daughter asked, why do you do that? I said, well, Grandma used to do that all the time. But why? She says, I don't know. So she called Grandma and said, why did you always cut out the roast? She says, I didn't have a pot big enough. So I cut out the ends of the roast and put it in there. So it's easy how things can become a tradition. And all of a sudden the tradition becomes, hey, it's law. You've got to obey it. And come on, guys, just common sense, right? Unfortunately, common sense isn't very common these days.
Well, I think when you start mixing man into certain things, they tend to mess it up. You know, we're talking about the people who are all against, if you're painting a picture or if you have a figurine, if you collect figurines or stuff that they, it's kind of like what I see that the Yehuda did back in the day when they started placing fence posts around the commandments. We're going to doubly make sure we don't break this, so we're going to put these fences around everything, and and it completely goes away from the meaning of what they're putting the fence around.
We have it also in the Messianic understanding today. We have leaders, one in particular, I won't mention his name because for whatever reason, I don't want to speak ill of anybody, but he has said regarding his teat seats that I wear, oh, you shouldn't wear them in a bathroom because they could get dirty. So he's almost making his congregation take off their cheat seats when they go to the bathroom. It doesn't make sense. right? It's not a commandment to take off your cheat sheets to go to the bathroom. But if you start taking a commandment, which is to wear the cheat sheet, and then add to it, you're doing exactly what the Father's told us not to do. Add to his commandments. Deuteronomy 4 verses 2, don't add to nor take anything away from my commandments. And unfortunately, people do that. It's not that they have the wrong heart. They're trying to make it even better, like you were saying about putting the fence around the Torah. But they just make things worse.
Well, you could say that the tzitzit in the bathroom is a matter of sanitation. You know, I mean, if their tzitzit end up touching the floor and there's other people who, you know.
Well, then wash your cheat sheets. Wash them. I wash them. Take them off and wash them. That's what it is.
Hang them in your pocket so they don't drag on the floor.
Well, there you go. All kinds of ways you can fix things up. But to try and make it a commandment of some kind that you shouldn't do it, it gets ridiculous. Right?
Yeah.
Well, at least people are trying to regard what he said. That's a positive.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that at all. It's when they make it a commandment. They say you're not allowed to do that. That's going too far. That's adding to the Torah. Anyways.
So, you know, I could kick this up one notch of conflict again and say, okay, Sukkot's coming up.
Yeah.
And he said, dwell in a sukkah for a week. Okay, what's the word dwell? Well, it's spelled in Hebrew shin bet. So if you look at that word, it also means sit. It also means return, shuv, shin vav bet. It also means an old man come back around. So dwell in a sukkah. What's a sukkah? Well, the word Samic Kaf Hey, sukkah, has to do with thatched branches. Okay, so he said go out and collect 4 species. So if people say, well, there's this thing called a lulav, plural is lulavim, and in the lulav, you can buy one from Israel and have it sent to you. I think it costs like $50 or $70 or something. And it comes with a piece of a palm, one spike of a palm leaf, and an estrog or a citron, basically a lemon.
It's like a lemon, yeah.
And a piece of myrtle, and I think a piece of willow. And you could say, oh, those are the 4 species that were absolutely commanded that we have to have and that we have to wave around.
Which is correct.
And if you move out of the land,
directions or something.
well, if you move out of the land that doesn't have those 4 species, now you're in big trouble and you got to buy one from Israel. So that kicks up the economy. So it's going to cost you, $70 and plus mailing, and you better do it before Sukkot happens. It's like, wait a second. If you look at the description of those 4, one of the words I believe is Tamar. Well, Tamar, that's a palm tree. Why is it a palm tree? Because the word Tamar means to shoot straight up into the air like a column of smoke. Well, that's what a palm tree does. Yeah, but that's what a pine tree does also. Well, then why can't you use a pine tree if you live in California?
You can. Absolutely you can.
It doesn't say it has to be a palm tree. So
No,
here's
it doesn't.
And then the myrtle, I think, is what is called the beautiful tree. And the citron is the one that's ornamented with fruit. Well, gosh, you could use an orange tree, or you could use an apple tree, or you could use a crab apple, or anything else. I mean, a pine tree, again, is ornamented with pine cones. It didn't say it has to be a citron or an estrog or and it's like, oh, man.
You saying it says to shoot up into the air with smoke, like smoke?
That's the word Tamar, to rise up tall. In fact, Jacob's...
So could you use fireworks?
Sure, Kurt, go ahead and shoot off some fireworks. What I'm saying is he did say it had to be a type of tree. But the myrtle, I mean, could you use a different type of tree and still fulfill literally what he said? It doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, the word palm has to do with, I believe, like the open hand. And it's like, well, what if you had some other kind of bush that looked like that? What I'm saying is that just because something was done in the land a certain way and it's become a tradition doesn't mean that we better do that right now and we have to order that thing from Israel or go find it. I mean, if you can, that would be nice. But I'm saying that there's a different way to do things, which I think is perfectly acceptable. And then the question is, when he says dwell in your sukkah for a week, does that mean you have to sleep in it or only sit in it all the time or sit in it occasionally? Can you have a corporate sukkah? Does every person have to have a sukkah? Does it mean you can have a tent? Can it be a motorhome? Can it be a motel? And it's like it's a temporary dwelling and it's like, oh man. And when people start to say, hey, let's regard the festival of Sukkot, it immediately turns into a giant quarrel about what do we do and how do we do it. And we're not going to associate with those bozos who keep doing the stupid thing. Interesting.
Don't leave out when to do it. That's a debate.
That's right. But the word bozo literally means he's an idiot. And when I was a kid, bozo the clown was some guy, must have been Jewish, because the word bet vav Zion literally means a fool and idiot to be scorned, which is that clown. It's really funny to think of. That's a Hebrew word, boz, bet vav Zion. And so it's like you have friends, fellow believers, who think you must do it this way or else you're an infidel. You're just messing everything up. And it's like, okay, find people who agree with you. Same calendar, same style, same interest in study, whatever, same type of food. I would draw the line saying, he said don't eat pork. He said don't eat lizard and rat and cockroach. So don't eat those things. Somebody else was on the internet the other day and saying, in Leviticus 11, verse 20, he says, whatever flies, swarms, and walks on four is an abomination. Well, a chicken walks on four toes. What? Chickens are an abomination to eat. This one lady, and she meant well, but she was saying she really felt the Holy Spirit was telling her, Christian, I believe, she had a head covering, so maybe she's Messianic, but she was saying, I really believe that in this dream vision she had, the chicken was mixed with cat and reptile. And it's like, well, what was that vision? What was that dream? What was that telling her? Maybe it's saying that some stores you go to have been modifying genetics, which I know they have. And as a matter of fact, the gates of hell, Mr. Billy has made it his objective in life to have cloned meat so that nobody will kill animals to eat carne, flesh, but you can get meat grown in laboratories. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate your intention to help us here. Well, what do they blend it with? If they're growing masses of cells of meat in a laboratory, is it pure chicken or is it chicken mixed with cat and lizard? I don't know. Maybe this lady was having some insight provided by the Ruach to say, you better be careful because things are changing in your days. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not saying she's crazy. I'm saying that we don't know what the heck is going on around us. I mean, I've heard that there's a certain company that makes southern chicken where they grow them in with hormones and in warehouses, and they never see the light of day and they never touch the ground. And it's like, oh man. So to eat what Yahweh said was food, and you could say, well, did he ever say chicken was food? I mean, they walk on four toes, 3 in the front, 1 in the back, kind of like the peace symbol. It's like, wait a minute, didn't they eat quail? Don't they have the same kind of foot? Okay, that means poultry is good. He fed them quail. Thank you. Okay, at least we can know we can do that. And he said, if it has a
stop. I'm just saying, stop. Pretty soon we won't be able to eat anything because someone thinks it's bad or they've had a dream and maybe it was just a pizza they had the night before. Who knows, right?
That's right.
I know somebody who recently just bailed on this whole understanding. Like they were in it for a year, and then because of these conversations, it just became too much for them. Not our conversations, just too many voices out there, man. I feel like the best solution is to keep it simple. Why are we making it so confusing? Why
we're trying to walk in his ways. And as soon as you try to keep it simple, it all of a sudden becomes complex and confusing. It just does. That's the nature of walking in
That's
his
human
ways.
nature. It's human nature to be, you do it my way because I know I'm right. You know, instead of just getting along. Like I said, if you agree on 80, 85, 90% of what the scriptures are saying, and you can agree on most of those things, it's better than most marriages. So why not just forget about the stuff that your wife hangs this on the wrong place or does that? Forget about it. Just get along.
There is that fine line of having discussions and having arguments. I think it's good. I think it's good to search out the scriptures and find out what he's actually saying. But we can't shy away from having good adult discussions without getting
without anger.
You know, the Israelis, if you go to a restaurant in Jerusalem, we went to this one particular restaurant, and one side served dairy products. You know, you can have cheese on your salad or whatever. The other side sold meat products, and the two can't touch. You cannot have a piece of cheese on your hamburger. Illegal. And so the question is, why? Well, because there's a verse that says, don't boil a calf in its mother's milk, or don't boil a kid, a baby goat, in its mother's milk. Wait a minute. So because you're not supposed to boil a baby goat in its mother's milk, does that mean you can't have chicken Parmesan salad? Oh, yes, you can't put Parmesan cheese on your chicken. What? What's that got to do with a baby goat being boiled in its mother's milk? And so, in order to honor the heart or the intent over the centuries, the rabbis have come up with cultural protocols. Just separate dairy from meat, period. Any meat, any dairy. Okay.
But they forgot about Abraham giving a cheeseburger to the three from whether it's Yeshua or Yahweh or coming down to the tent. He served them a cheeseburger. So there you go.
You're right. He did. He had milk and he had the fatted calf.
That's right. There's a cheeseburger right there.
My understanding of that whole thing, and I know it probably could have been a pagan practice, but that if you don't want to eat the kid while it's still nursing on the mother,
Right.
But that's different.
That's why I say wait, huh?
That's actually different than having a vat where you take the mother's milk and boil the kid. Again, if it was a pagan practice, what I'm saying is that we read these things and we turn them into, okay, what am I supposed to do with this instruction? Why did he say this? And I'm not disparaging the heart of people wanting to walk in his ways. I'm just saying we want to keep it simple, but it becomes complex. But I've never even had the thought to boil a baby goat in its mother's milk. Well, just to say that everything gets complicated as soon as we start to make it simple, just for the sake of having the regard. And the reason I'm bringing these up is not to be contentious. I'm just saying where anyone chooses to draw the line of consideration is your choice to draw the line there. And I'm not trying to say anybody's right or wrong, stupid or smart. It's just we can't avoid the complications, that everything walking on Yahweh's path is stepping stones, walking along a path. And inevitably, he brings conflict onto the path.
Galen just unmuted herself. She's getting ready to speak. Enlighten us.
True, it's quite complicated. I remember, Eric, some years ago, I think we were in Ohio, and I told you I was brand new into this, and I was so shocked to see that any gatherings, it was all about arguing when the Shabbat starts and, you know, if you eat a cheeseburger or not and whatnot. And I was like, and I told you, I said, this doesn't make sense. I cannot believe that this is the way of walking with Yahweh. And you simply told me, you said, well, maybe, Glenn, you're on to something. Thing is still, keep meditating about this. And haven't yet have a haha moment. Like, obviously, I'm in this myself, trying to understand the calendar, trying to understand when the months start and all these things. So no clue. I don't know.
But you can see why there's a problem that people inevitably bump into different opinions, right?
On one of our trips to Israel, we were staying in a hotel, of course, in Israel. And as a group, we went out and bought some kosher wine. All right, we made sure it was kosher wine. So we're back in the hotel and the bar's closed. So we grab one of the bottles and start sharing. I think there was 6 of us there. So we pour a bottle. We start drinking this wine. Then all of a sudden, the rabbi for the hotel comes over and he says, "You can't drink that wine in here." And I said, "Well, we made sure it was kosher wine." He says, "Well," he looked at the bottle, held it in his hand, and he was perspiring. He was just really nervous. And he said, "Well, it's not kosher enough. You can't have it in the hotel." In other words, he didn't just to buy the wine from the hotel. It was kosher enough, but the one that we bought wasn't kosher enough. So again, whether it's an opinion based on because of his job or whatever, he was telling us, he felt compelled to tell us that we couldn't have this particular wine because it was not kosher enough. So again, you're going to run into those opinions. So what did we do? Did we scream at him? No, we said, "Okay, fine, we'll stop drinking. And when the bar opens, we'll open up. We'll buy one of your bottles from there." And he, we treated him nicely, and he was calm. And then he didn't interfere with us for the rest of the week or so that we were there.
So a question about kosher. Now, I know what Torah says about what we can eat and what we cannot eat, but is kosher? When you say kosher, are you coming from that, or are you coming from what the rabbis have blessed?
There's 2 different koshers. There's the biblical kosher, and then there's the rabbinical kosher. And if you try to live by the rabbinical kosher, you won't be able to eat anything.
What about in the Torah portion when you go out, when it talks about don't take the egg with the mother hen? And isn't that really saying because it's going to be a total annihilation? So could that be what it means about boiling a kid in its mother's milk?
I believe that the answer would be for any subject, as we just look up on the alphabet and ponder about the letters, the meanings of the letters, and see more depth into it. Not saying that we don't obey. We do the action of what we understand, but I think there's so much more.
So if the Shemitah year is beginning at Rosh Hashanah, which is coming up, and we are told during Chag HaSukkos to gather, to do the thatched branches on top of our sukkahs. Is that okay to gather branches during a Shemitah year?
Would you say you
Well,
can?
my understanding.
I was just thinking about that, and I was wondering if anybody has any idea.
My understanding of the Shemitah year is that you're just allowed. You're given the land rest. It has nothing. It's not like you can't go gather like a Shabbat. It's given the land its Sabbath.
And whatever you can eat, whatever grows out of the land for that day, you just can't harvest it. That's what he's telling you. Don't harvest it. Anyways.
Yeah, you can eat what grows of itself, but you can't plant anything. You can't harvest anything.
He said, "Don't plow the land." So you're not plowing, planting, and harvesting as if it were acreage of crops. Like, the background here, there's all these fields of different trees, and well, the trees are already planted, but that doesn't mean you can't pick the trees and eat them. He said you can eat what grows of itself. So the Shemitah, in my understanding, has to do with, well, there's a piece of ground. Don't go out and plow it, put seeds in, and harvest them when the seeds grow. But if you didn't plow and plant, and stuff grew because the seed heads fell in the ground from last year and they grew of themselves, sure, go ahead and do that, but don't harvest it with a combine and bundle it up and sell it on the market. But you can have people go out in the field and pick and eat. So again, the reason for bringing these things up, I know they're controversial, I know they're aggravating, but for us, let me tell you my mind for doing this. If we encourage people to read the Torah, they're going to bump into these verses. If we encourage people to regard the Moedim, you're going to bump into these concepts. And suddenly, what seemed like it was just going to be a nice party and fun turns into an aggravating, wearisome conflict with everybody else. And I'm just trying to tell people, this is only a few steps down the path, aggravating conflict. Now, I think that the really nice way to deal with it all is just what Elin said. Just have fun reading his words. Okay, but a few steps down the path from there is aggravating conflict. But at least we can do that. We can make a fun card game out of it.
Yeah, that doesn't satisfy the requirement, though. Just reading the alphabet, there's a requirement to do these things. So how do we do them is going to always be the question. And if we're not asking that question, we're not genuinely following Yahuwah. We're not invested in it. So this has to be a thing.
For conflict to happen, there has to be two sides to it. And if I refuse to be part of the conflict, just because we're celebrating, let's say, the feast on different times or in different manners, if I refuse to be part of the conflict, say, okay, fine, do it your way. There's no point to arguing. There really is no point. There's no winner in an argument because each side wants to be right. Just forget it. If somebody wants to celebrate it, let's say Sabbath from sundown to sundown, that's their prerogative, right? If they happen to be in Alaska, that might be a different thing to do. But nevertheless, it's their prerogative. They can do whatever it is that they want as far as celebrating the Sabbath because they think they're being right, then fine. But allow other people to make their decisions based on how they see it, and they're still celebrating the Sabbath. Or same as the feast, just allow people to do it when they think it's correct. They're not doing it to spite you. They're just doing it because they think it's correct. Then allow them to have that understanding and don't argue about it. That's what the Father doesn't want. He says how wonderful it is for brothers to dwell together. All right. So we have a little disagreement there. Big deal. Forget about it. Eric goes to how many different Sukkots? 3 or 4 different Sukkots. Maybe not every
Mark,
year.
you sound really upset. Do you think I was saying to debate it? I'm just saying eventually we're all going to run into it. We're going to all, it's like studying the letters is great, but we have a requirement by Yahuwah when we, down the road, because our ancestors forgot it, we're supposed to do it. So how do you do it? It's going to be a question. And then I guess nobody wants to do stuff alone, so they're going to try to convince other people to come their way and their understanding. But, you know, like, I guess the whole work out your salvation with great fear and trembling is work out your salvation with great fear and trembling. And you know what? Make a commitment to do it, but do it. Don't just sit there and say, I'm not going to do it because it's too hard to figure out. Like, if you got to follow Judah's calendar,
that's 100%. Go ahead and do it.
Yeah,
right.
It starts with the Shabbat, you know.
Absolutely.
But I believe that it's a good thing to be mature enough to discuss together, and I don't call this a fight. I think it's if we are honest, intellectually honest, we want the truth. We can listen to other people and measure to the scripture and see if we could come into agreement or not, and if not, we respect. I think it's a very important thing to be able to sit together and yes, argue with respect, because iron sharpens iron. And I've learned a lot just by exposing myself to other people's opinion, even if sometimes at the first time thing, it just like, this sounds wrong. And then I would look up into it and then, oh yeah, I was wrong about this. So I take this on. I think maybe let's believe that as we look up on the noon stomach, as we look up on these precious letters, we're being transformed. What if it's more about focusing about those precious letters? And as we do, we more and more love it and embrace it. And why wouldn't that be transforming us? Because it's all about from which tree are we going to be eating? And remember that there was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden. And that tree was the wrong tree. So we want to focus on the tree of life, which is, I believe, the Nun Samek.
Yeah.
And I believe as we do, we're becoming more and more transformed into his image. Because as a tree bears fruit in a very normal way, maybe that will happen with our lives, just being transformed.
Prayer shawl is also called a sukkah. So someone who can't build a sukkah could just put a blanket over their head and raise their hands for the palm branches and just go to prayer with him during those 7 days. And I think he would be okay with that as well.
Well, the point of this is like somebody may accidentally come across this video, and it's a complex subject matter, but somebody may just be doing their first Shabbat, and they say, I'm going to watch something, and they find this video. And there's so many voices out there saying how to do the Father's things, and I'm here to tell you that nobody knows. None of us know. We really, literally do not know for sure 100%. None of us. None of us.
Yeah.
I think the enemy has come in and has really just messed everything up, and we're sitting here trying to figure it out, and who's going to figure out what the correct calendar is? Well, who cares? I think the Father's looking down on us right now, and he's saying, my kids are trying.
It comes back to that person that was in our group, and one of them they left, but they talked about wearing your dad's clothes. If he's adorned himself with his moedim, then we're trying to put on his clothes. We're trying to do it, and I think he just thinks it looks adorable. His kids are walking around in his shoes and his shirts, and they don't fit. They're too big.
And to become literate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. To be willing to know who he is, what pleases him in itself, I think is very important.
So here's the thing. Like, this is kind of a supernatural thing. It's like we did our Sukkot 2 weeks ago. Now time flies, but there's 3 people there that I spoke to that left, and all 3 of us saw a rainbow, which I find just fascinating. Which is a rainbow is a covenant, and it was a small rainbow, but a complete rainbow. And 3 of us saw it at separate times. Like I just thought we went in different ways on our way home, and I just find that like, wow. There's Yahuwah seeing us. Remember, he looked down and he saw it, and I felt like he just showed us, all 3 of us. None of us talked until afterwards. Like I just mentioned it, and then the 2 other people saw rainbows. I'm like, that's just fascinating. I don't know if it was the right day. I don't know if we're doing Sukkot. Maybe I felt like we were doing it too early, but you know what? We did it. We did it.
How important? Because Scripture does say that a lot of these are supposed to line up with certain harvest cycles. Passover and unleavened bread is supposed to line up with the barley harvest, and Sukkot lines up with the wheat harvest, and then in the fall you have the grape, and I forgot what the other one is. But how are these feasts? Aren't they supposed to line up with these harvest cycles?
So if I live in Australia, what's my harvest cycle?
Wouldn't it be the same? I guess it wouldn't be because it's winter time.
The southern hemispheres are completely different.
6 months back.
So I guess that all points back to.
It's the heart, man. It's the heart. It's the heart. What heart? What heart are you doing?
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying, if are we supposed to? Everybody points to Israel as what their harvest cycle is, because that's his land, and is everyone who's around the world supposed to point to what it is there?
I just feel that Israel's a people. It's not a land yet.
Well, I understand. Yeah, I'm just but looking in the past when this was written and everything, that it was based on it being there in the land.
Yes, that's what some people believe. Some people do hold to that. Just so you know, there's a verse that says the law goes forth from Jerusalem, and they take that as meaning synchronized to Jerusalem's calendar and clock. But does that mean if it's midnight in Jerusalem that we should, regard that their midnight, and even though it's noon our time, or how far do you take that? All these things present complications as you walk down this path. And I'm just bringing it to bear because if we tell people, hey, regard these things, they will bump into this stuff. It's along the path.
Yeah.
And we're not saying, oh, well, because the path gets complicated, then let's just all forget it. What I'm saying is I'm warning people the path gets complicated. And it's just, that's the way it's designed. It's just like if somebody says to live life on the planet Earth as a human being is supposed to be nice and fuzzy and warm. It's like, no, there's blackberry bushes and there's night and there's rattlesnakes and there's terrible things that happen here. Well, tough. That's just the way it is.
Well,
okay?
it's
no longer
the same thing with our Jewish brothers. We calling this Rosh Hashanah. But what did our Father say? He said, "This shall be the beginning of months," which is at Passover. So, right. Am I going to argue with them? Say they want to call Rosh Hashanah? Go ahead, call it whatever you want. But the Father,
you're wrong. But call it whatever you want.
Well, I have a theory about that. And yes, it says that in the month of Aviv, that is the counting of months, and then when you get to the seventh month, that was counting of years. But I think that has more to do. This, me personally, y'all can disagree with me, that has more to do with the Shemitah and the Jubilee. I mean, nobody really talks about that a lot, and I mean that's Yah's reckoning of time. I mean, if you look at what we think is a millennium is 1,000 years, well, in Yah's time it's 980 years, because when you're on the weekly pattern, and then the Shemitah, which is pattern after the week, and then of course the Jubilee, which is 7 Shemitahs, that's every 49 years. It's not going to add up to 1,000. You're going to add up to 980.
To walk in the ways of Yahweh, you will see these sights on the horizon around you. That's why we're bringing them up. And what does it mean to walk in the ways of Yahweh? This is the scenery. Like I'm standing here and I'm seeing these farmlands. I'm not seeing ocean. I'm not seeing forest. I'm not seeing desert. I'm seeing farmland. Well, when you start walking along the path of Yahweh's Aleph Bet, along the path of Yahweh's Torah, you will see things that you don't see in church, that you don't see in the synagogue, that you don't see, but we're just talking about different things along the way. And if you choose to stop and engage them intellectually, you can look at what did he say? Why did he say it? What about the calf and the milk, or what about the chicken and the Parmesan cheese, or what about the sleeping in a tent versus sleeping in a motorhome for a week during Sukkot, or maybe you could sleep in your house and just go out and sit. What I'm saying is you're going to bump into these things, and I'm trying to decriminalize the regard of some of these matters. And some people don't like maybe that I'll do that, but I'm saying just to start regarding Yahweh's ways is a foreign culture, but it's keyed to the construct of the universe by the Mishkan pattern synchronized to the Moedim. So if we regard the Moedim, somehow we're tapping into the pillars that hold up the entire universe. And to us, foreign, and to us, they're argumentative. But I'm trying to suggest we get past that, but we have to recognize that it's par for the course. Argumentative disagreements is just what's
and to add to that voice is to tell people that if you're brand new, don't give up, don't go back. It's Egypt back there, it's slavery back there, it's a pillar of salt back there. Stop. Keep going. Don't go back. Well, you've already been there. What's there? There's nothing. This is all of creation, man. These days, all of heaven is waiting for us to show up. They're waiting. They're there already. We've just been blowing it off. And now we're here. Don't give up.
So if you're going to go deep sea fishing and you get on a boat and you go out into the ocean, the first thing that happens is you're going to feel seasick. Well, maybe not everybody, but a good chance. And it's like, oh gosh, why did I come out here? This is just horrible. And now I'm stuck here on this dang boat for the next 8 hours. I can't enjoy anything. It's like, listen, if you can get past getting seasick, then you can have, all kinds of other fun that you can't otherwise have unless you're out on the boat, on the water. And I'm just saying that some of walking in Yahweh's ways makes you feel sick right out of the gate, which is why people turn around and go back. It's like, okay, I'm just letting people know. I'm trying to demystify some of the problems with regarding his ways.
But don't give up, right, Eric? That's what you're trying to say, is don't give up.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm saying that it's the pillars of the universe. That's why I'm trying to show you this arch here behind me. It's like these Moedim, these festivals of Yahweh, these Chag are what hold up the pillars of his kingdom. Yeah, we squabble about it because we don't know. It's strange. We don't know. It's pillars of his kingdom. It's his Moed. It's his adorning testimony. Okay, well, here we go.
Hallelujah.
Somebody's got to pray so we can stop recording.
Well, can I ask one more question, Kurt?
Is it something that we could talk in the after show or?
Well, no, I think it's pertinent for this. It's.
Have you downloaded the software yet?
No, not yet. But when I get, I will. But what I wanted to ask Eric, and we're sitting here and we were talking about that, somebody may come along and they may see this and they're, be curious about it, and they just may be coming into this and they might not understand the whole alphabet and they're going to wonder, maybe there's a teaching for this that he's already done, but the person comes in, he's going to say, well, how do I start? What do I do first? How do I learn this? Where do I start? What do I do first?
Okay, so I would why don't we, just for the sake of the recording and all, let's end with this. I will say, like we started, let's look at the Mishkan pattern. Okay, so what's the Mishkan pattern? The first element is the big white fence. And it had a 4-color embroidery, which I think has to do with the name Yod He Vav He written in color. That's like, okay, that's just a subjective sense of appreciating the 4 colors, blue, purple, red, and white. But you could say, oh, there's the kingdom of heaven. Let's just go in. No, you can't go in. You're filthy. You've done stupid things and criminal things that are trespassing against the kingdom. You can't just walk in. Well, how do you become cleansed? Oh, guess what? Outside the tabernacle, they had this thing called the red heifer sacrifice. So the priest would cleanse you with the ashes of the red heifer so that you could enter into the Mishkan. Well, Yeshua was crucified outside the city walls as a type, as a metaphorical picture of the red heifer cleansing you so that you could enter. Moshe in Deuteronomy said, I put before you life and death, blessing and cursing, and I urge you to choose life. So I take the big white fence of the Mishkan is saying choose life, but the only way that you can get into choosing life, Yeshua said, I'm the door to my Father's house. You have to go through me. So he is a type of the red heifer sacrifice. So you could say, okay, I will acknowledge the crucifixion of Yeshua as a way to cleanse me and make me fit then to enter the kingdom of Yod He Vav He. Thank you, Yeshua. Cleanse me, purify me to be able to enter undefiled and restore relationship with his Father, Yod He Vav He. So that's entering in through the big white fence. Then what do? Well, the first thing in was the barbecue grill, lining up with the letters Kaf and Lamed, which is the Torah. Learn the Torah. Learn the constitution of the kingdom. Read the instructions of what kingdom is this and how does it operate. Next thing was the laver. Has to do with the letters Mem and Nun, has to do with our attitude of, just like the Torah was having the seed planted in your heart, Mem and Nun, the water laver, is watering the seed and nurturing it to grow like a pregnant woman. You are impregnated with the seed, the instructions of the Torah of Yahuwah, and then you, by your attitude, your personal response to it, you nurture the growing of that seed within you. Okay, then in the covered place, there was a menorah, table to show bread, and altar of incense. Menorah looks like a tree, so the tree bears fruit. So that seed of the Torah that you took in because you chose life and entered his kingdom, you nurtured it within you, it turns into this tree that bears fruit. What fruit? Well, the fruit of Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, gentleness, kindness, mercy, self-control, temperance. Okay, you start behaving like he said to. Okay, and then you look at that fruit that you bear. It's like, gee, I had a bad attitude. I had a rabid outburst against an aggression or against an injustice or against somebody that pulled in front of me and caused me to spill my drink all over the my passenger or something. I mean, there's real aggravations in life, but you look at the fruit and then you reassess it. Gee, maybe I shouldn't have done that. What did he say to do? Maybe I should forgive the guy that I called him a dirty name or whatever. Yeah, that's real life. And then that's the table of showbread, socialized, like who sits at a table, family and friends and maybe some strangers, and you share bread together. So the tree bearing fruit is the doing of what he said. And then the socialization with family and friends is that why does he make it so darn difficult? Because that's what the human social experience is. And then there's the next letter, the altar of incense, the pay, which speaks of prayer, your open mouth, you're talking to him about it, walking with him, discussing it. And then, so you somic ayin pay, the menorah, you might say the ayin like the fruit that the menorah bears, and the pay, the mouth that eats the fruit. And then going back to, so somic ayin pay is like Micah 6:8, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your Elohim as you are doing justice and loving mercy, that you socialize. So in other words, do what he said, get along with each other, even when the other people are making it difficult for you, and talk to him about it. And that's the routine. And set before you, like in the Ark of the Covenant, in the place called the Kadosh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, is this hope set before you of the sprout, the Zodi, the resurrection, that he said that when we operate in his ways and turn our hearts back to him because we're listening to him. Now I'm going in reverse order all the way back to the fence, because we chose life. There's the fence. We listen to his Torah. There's the barbecue grill. We nurture it in our heart. There's the labor. And then there's the menorah, do what he said, bearing fruits. And then we get along with each other as we're trying to exercise those fruits being appropriate. And then we talk to him about it as we are eating of those fruits, like that's the festival of Sukkot, getting along together, only rejoicing. And the hope set before us is the restoration of the kingdom and eternal life, is a picture of Yeshua coming out of the grave, of Israel coming back as a confederated nation, together being his people. So we have that hope before us that we hold onto and foster its notion in our own mind and heart. Okay, well, there's the Mishkan pattern. Choose life, learn the instructions, have a fond affection for the instructions, then do what he said, grow where you're planted as a tree bearing fruit, share the fruit with as each other, because the bearing of the fruit is within the context of the socialized, the society bumping into each other. Talk to him about it as you open your heart in prayer, walking with him, and have the hope set before you. There's the Mishkan pattern. I just said it half a dozen times. Okay, that's what we do. Where do we start? Choose life. Thank you, Yeshua, for cleansing us so that we can enter in. Sorry for all the stupid things I've said and done. Now let me learn the instructions of what it should have been. There's where you start.
Well, we're gonna teach you now, and we could do the after show because.
Hey, I just wanted to, if it's okay, I'd like to, where Eric was referencing choose life, that's located in Deuteronomy 30. And the few verses that are right before that is really, really pertinent to this. It starts in verse 11. It says in the English, "For this commandment that I command you today, it is not hidden from you, and it is not distant. It is not in heaven for you to say, who can ascend to the heaven for us and take it for us, so that we can listen to it and perform it. Nor is it across the sea for you to say, who can cross to the other side of the sea for us and take it for us, so that we can listen to it and perform it. Rather, the matter is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, to perform it." And then in the next verse 15, and then it talks about choosing life. But those few verses seem to point to everything and say, well, we should learn how to read his words, speak his words, and then it will be in our heart, the seed in our heart of his words, and then that will bear fruit, will produce living fruit that will perform his requirements. Hallelujah.
There you go. There's like a little metaphorical place where you can see the Mishkan pattern explained, even though it doesn't say here is the Mishkan pattern. That's a very good example. Thank you. That would be.
We can get into that deeper next week though, because we're going to talk about it next week, right? The Mishkan pattern.